Let's talk about the black church. A pastor was robbed today of nearly $500,000 in jewelry as he gave his Sunday sermon. There were black women in there. There were black children in there. There were black elders in there. There were black men in there. Here's what I want to say to the black church. I hope every pastor is listening. If you went to church today, call your pastor and tell him he needs to turn on King Kong consciousness right now. I have a message for the black church tonight. First of all, I am happy that the pastor and his family are safe. I am happy that the congregation at their Brooklyn church is safe. I am happy that it appeared by the video that I was sent that nobody was harmed during the course of the Brooklyn robbery inside that Brooklyn church today. And I'm happy that those brothers who robbed the pastor did not injure anyone, did not harm anyone. Thank you, brothers, for that. There were children there. There were women there. You still had no right to pull out guns in the presence of our women and children, but I am still thankful you didn't hurt anybody. But here's what I want to say. In 2015, Dylan Roof walked into Mother Emanuel Church in South Carolina and murdered 9 Africans, including 6 mothers. Dylan Roof walked into a church in Charleston, South Carolina, Mother Emanuel, and murdered 9 Africans, including 6 mothers. I'm trying to understand why we still have black churches who don't have security. I'm trying to understand why we have black churches that still don't have armed guards. I'm trying to understand why we still have black churches who are living in some sort of imaginary fairy tale where they don't think that the safety of their congregation is in danger because they claim to be doing God's work. The black church, every black church, mega church, small church, medium church, you need a security force. You need a security team. You need regular armed guards. That robbery in Brooklyn was too easy. That robbery in Brooklyn was too easy. The murder of Dylan Roof's murder of our elders in Charleston, South Carolina was too easy. Why do we still have churches without security? Why do we still have black churches were bombed and burned to the ground for nearly 400 years? Black churches were bombed and burned to the ground for nearly 400 years. You got white folk running into black churches, killing black folks. Black pastors were some of the original Africans to be hanged first because they were some of the most literate. So the black clergy was always a target of white supremacy. The black clergy was always a target of white supremacy. I'm trying to understand, in 21st century America, how can you be a black church in 21st century America and you don't have no security? Can somebody help me understand, and understand how a black church in 21st century America doesn't have security? I have security everywhere I go. And I know my people love me, but there's always a few who don't. So if I have security as one man wherever I go, if I have security as one man wherever I go, if you have a whole church where you collecting money and you showing off materialism, why in the hell do you think you are safe from danger? And I got news for the black church. And I don't wish no harm on no church, no pastor, no congregation, but I got news for the church. The black church is the new bank in the black community. I said the black church is the new bank in the black community. What I mean by that, these young brothers who have grown up poor, unemployed, public assistance, father in jail, mother on drugs, or mother doing her best, but she can't make all the ends meet. These young men out here struggling in the ghettos of black America who have sat by and watched black pastors get rich off the poverty pennies of their grandmothers. These young black men are sick and tired of watching black pastors and black bishops and black preachers get rich off the poverty pennies of their mothers and grandmothers. And now these young black men are beginning to turn on the one institution that was always sacred ground for black America. I said these young brothers are going to start robbing churches now. They are going to start robbing churches. This I fear, and I don't want this. I don't want this, but I have to tell the truth. I don't believe this is the last time we're going to see a church robbed by young black brothers. I don't think this is going to be the last time we see a church get robbed by young black brothers. The black church is the new bank. I said the black church is the new bank. And if you are a black church and you collecting money and you showing off your watches and showing off your Mercedes and showing off your Benz and showing off your $1,000 suit, and you black women coming in there with your $500 hairstyles and your $1,000 high heels, I don't want no harm to come to nobody in my family. I love all my people. Christian, Muslim, Jehovah's Witness, I love my people. But what I'm telling you is these young brothers are sick and tired of watching the black church rob black people blind. I'm not saying this pastor was guilty of that. I'm not saying this pastor is guilty of that. I don't know that church. I don't know that pastor. For all I know, that could have been a very down-to-earth church that did not take in a lot of revenue. I cannot pass judgment on that pastor. And I'm glad he is safe and his wife is safe and his congregation is safe. And I'm glad those young brothers exercised enough discipline not to harm nobody. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the black church. You cannot talk about you are doing God's work. How in the hell are you doing God's work when you have a church in the ghetto? You are expecting poor mothers and grandmothers in the ghetto to donate to your church. And then you take this money that comes to you from poor black women in the ghetto, and you don't use none of that money to rebuild the ghetto. You don't use none of that money to empower the ghetto. You don't use none of that money to employ our children. You don't use none of your Jesus money. You are not using Jesus's money to serve Jesus's children. You are buying homes in white neighborhoods. You buying airplanes. You going on fancy vacations. You Negroes are driving Mercedes Benzes, Cadillac trucks, BMWs. You are wearing $5,000 suits, $2,500 suits, $1,000 suits. You wearing $100,000 watches. I'm not saying anybody should be robbed. I am not saying anybody should be robbed. I'm saying if you are bold enough, to walk into a black ghetto, claim you are about the community. If you are bold enough to walk into a black ghetto and claim you are about the community, drive an expensive luxury car, wear luxury clothes, luxury watch, luxury shoes, and you claim to be doing the Lord's work, and we don't see the community benefiting at all. We don't see the community benefiting at all. We don't see the black community benefiting at all from the money that the black church takes from the ghetto. I hate to say it. We are in an economic crisis. We are in an economic crisis. And these young black brothers in our cities are sick and tired of watching the pastor live high up on the hog while he struggles. Black churches, please get you some security. Black churches, please get you some security. Black churches, please get you some security. And I want to say this. I'm talking to my beautiful black women. I'm talking to my church-going sisters, my church-going mothers, my church-going queen mothers. Listen to me, ladies. Listen to your brother, Dr. Umar. If you go to a church that does not have security, if you go and worship at a church where there is no security, if you go and worship at a church that doesn't have any armed guards, you go to a church that doesn't have a security force, don't go back to church no more. Find you another church. You cannot afford to be traumatized, beaten, or robbed at gunpoint because your pastor isn't security conscious. Black woman, listen to me. There were children in that church in Brooklyn today. There were children in that church in Brooklyn today. Those children might be forever traumatized by what they saw. Post-traumatic stress disorder is real. Post-traumatic stress disorder is real. And I don't want to see no black woman traumatized. I don't want to see no black elders traumatized. I don't want to see no black children traumatized. Stop going to church that do not take your security seriously. Don't go to churches that don't take your security seriously. We are living in an economically desperate time. We have a whole generation of young black men and women. We have a whole generation of young black men and women who don't have a problem killing or stealing. Let me say it again. We got a whole generation of black children who don't have a problem killing or stealing in order to eat to live. And as you saw in Brooklyn today, they are willing to come into your church on Sunday and rob you. They are willing to come into your church on Sunday and rob you. They are willing to come into your church on Sunday and rob you. And I want to say this to the black church. I don't want no harm to come to no church or no church goers, no church leaders. I want you to get security. Stop being so damn cheap. How you got $100,000 car and you ain't got no security in your church? How you living in a $500,000 home in a white suburb and you ain't got no security for your church? How you got $100,000 Rolex watch? You got on a $100,000 Rolex watch and you ain't got no security? I don't understand this. You got on a $5,000 suit and you ain't got no security. Let me say this. My security at my events is not there mostly for me. My security at my events is there for the people. Security ain't about you, pastor. Security ain't about you, bishop. Security ain't about you, deacon. Security ain't about you, deaconess. Security is to protect the people who come out to support you. When I go to Toledo, there will be security to protect the people who come to see me. When I go to Cleveland, there will be security there to protect the people who came to see me. Security is to protect the people who come to see you. How you got all this money and all this expensive jewelry and you ain't got no damn security? I thought we learned from Dylan Roof, Charleston, South Carolina, 2015. I thought we learned from Dylan Roof, Charleston, South Carolina, 2015. I thought we learned from Dylan Roof, South Carolina, 2015. Now let me go deeper. Let me go deeper. What I'm about to say does not apply to every church. What I'm about to say does not apply to every church. What I'm about to say does not apply to every church. But I do want to say this. You have black churches that have been pimping the black community for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Let's be honest. The black church is a multi-billion-dollar institution. We give the black church $3 billion on average every Sunday. Excuse me, $3 million. The black church receives $3 million every Sunday in America, collectively speaking. 50 states, 50 million Africans. 50 states, 50 million Africans. 50 states, 50 million Africans. If we are giving the black church $3 million every Sunday, and you ain't got no schools, $3 million every Sunday, you ain't got no jobs. $3 million every Sunday, you ain't got no banks. $3 million every Sunday, you ain't got no hospitals. $3 million every Sunday, you ain't got no supermarkets. If the black community is giving the black church $3 million every Sunday, and the black church isn't doing anything for black people, you can make the argument. I'm not making the argument, but you can make the argument, and I'm not making the argument. You could make the argument that karma is coming to the black church for practicing capitalism instead of spirituality. I said, you can make the argument that karma is coming to the black church because you have been practicing capitalism instead of spirituality. Is karma coming to the black church because you've been practicing capitalism over spirituality? Let's be honest. How many black churches are helping black men get jobs? How many black churches are helping homeless black women find housing? How many black churches are stopping the violence in the neighborhood? How many black churches are helping people build businesses? How many black churches are fighting against racism and systemic oppression? What has the black church done in America since Dr. King? What has the black church done in America since Dr. King? What has the black church done in America since Dr. King? These young brothers and sisters, what they call them, Generation Z? Somebody help me out. Is this Generation Z? I think these Generation Z, they don't give a damn about what you preaching. They don't give a damn about what you teaching. All they see is the pastor eating, his wife is eating, his family is eating, the bishop is eating, the deacon is eating, and his family is starving. The black church is no longer off limits. I'm not happy about that. I'm not happy about that. I don't want to see crime and robbery in the black church. What happened in Brooklyn today was unacceptable. What happened in Brooklyn today was a travesty. No black pastor should be robbed while preaching, but it speaks to the fact. The Brooklyn robbery today in church speaks to the fact that the black church has turned its back on the black community. And because the black church has turned its back on the black community, the children of the community are now targeting the black church for economic justice. The black church has turned its back on the black community, and now the children of the black community is targeting the black church for economic justice. You better stop coming to church with your Rolex on. You better stop pulling up in a Mercedes. You better stop driving through the hood with a damn Cadillac truck. Them days is over. The pastor is no longer safe from community violence. The church is no longer safe from community violence. I'm sorry this is happening. I'm sorry the pastor got robbed. And I'm not judging him because I don't know him. But we all know every city got pastors who are hustling the community. Chicago got pastors hustling the community. Philadelphia has pastors hustling the community. Los Angeles has pastors hustling the community. Florida, North Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, Maryland, Connecticut, New York. Every black community has a handful of parasitic black churches. They exist to exploit the money from the people. You have black churches whose sole purpose is to get as much money as they can. And the children of the 21st century, Generation Z, the millennials, they are ready to collect. Brooklyn is only the beginning, and I'm telling black women right now, I'm telling black elders, don't take your children to church if there's no serious security. You cannot afford to go to church if there is no serious security. You cannot go. And I want to fault every pastor in America. I'm going to fault every black pastor in America who is asking black people to come worship in your church. And you don't even care enough about those black people you're asking to come worship in your church to have security for them. If I can have security at my events for the people who come out to support me, you can have security in your church for the people who come out to support you. and you getting way more money than I am. It is no excuse for a black church not to be serious about protecting the life and safety of the black people who come out to support them. The black church is no longer off limits. That pastor got robbed for almost $500,000 in jewelry. It's a new day in black America. Y'all better start locking the front doors to the church. You better start locking the back doors of the church, because let me tell you, and again, I'm going to thank those brothers, not for robbing the pastor, but I'm going to thank them for not harming the congregation, because you know what they could have did? Thank God they didn't. But do you know what they could have did? Thank God they didn't. But do you know what they could have did? They could have robbed everybody inside the church. They didn't have to stop at the pastor. They did not have to stop at the pastor. They could have robbed every elder, every mother, every father. They could have took the Jordans off your children's feet, your daughter's earrings out of her ear. They could have robbed the whole damn church. Stop going to church if there is no security. Stop going to church if there is no security. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper. I'm going to go a little bit deeper. I'm going to go a little bit deeper. Somebody inside the church I got the feeling that some of these church robberies are set up from the inside. I think there's an inside man working with the goons to get these black churches robbed. I think there's an inside man working with the goon squad to get these churches robbed. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. See, people are losing their respect for the black church because everybody sees that the black church is a business. People are losing their respect for the black church because everybody sees that the black church is now a business. When Dr. King was around, black church was a service. When Nat Turner was around, black church was a service. When Frederick Douglass was pastoring up in New York, black church was a service. When Bishop Turner was around, black church was a service. Black church is no longer a service. Black church is a business. Black church is no longer about spirituality. Black church is about capitalism. So the way these young brothers are looking at the church, they like, that's not God in there. How can that be God house? How can that be God house when everybody in his neighborhood is broke, hungry, and unemployed? But the pastor living good, his family living good, his son living good, his wife living good, the people on the choir living good, the deacons is living good, the bishops is living good, and I'm living in hell? How can that be God's house? That ain't God's house. That's a house of hypocrisy. In fact, the way they see it, they think they're doing God a service by robbing the black church. Listen to me. Listen to me. Understand, overstand, and understand. You got these young folks, they like, wait a minute. If that church is full of hypocrites, if that church is full of hypocrites, if that church is full of people who claim to be doing God's work and all they doing is robbing the poor, if that church is full of people who claim to be doing God's work and all they do is rob the poor, maybe I'm doing God a service by going in there and robbing the church. Maybe God wants me to go in there and rob this den of thieves. They say there's no honor amongst thieves. So if the pastor is a thief, if the preacher is a thief, if the bishop is a thief, if the deacon is a thief, I'm not disrespecting the churches who do God's work. I'm not disrespecting the churches who do God's work. I'm not disrespecting the churches who do God's work. I'm saying for the hypocritical churches, for the hypocritical churches, for the hypocritical churches who talk Jesus, but they only care about money. For the hypocritical church, that a den of thieves cannot be a sanctuary of God. A den of thieves cannot be a sanctuary of God. A den of thieves cannot be a sanctuary of God. And so all I'm saying is if your church is a den of thieves, if your church is a den of thieves, if what you got came from stealing from black folks, if what the black church has came from stealing from black folks, if what the pastor has came from stealing from black folks, what do you say to a group of young brothers who hungry, got kids to feed, who say if they stole it from the community, why can't I go steal it back and feed my family? If the black church stole their money from our community, how am I wrong to go into the church and steal it back? I ain't shoot nobody. I ain't stab nobody. I ain't punch nobody. I ain't stomp nobody. All I did was say, get down and lay down. In fact, you know what they call it? They don't call it robbery. They call it reparations. They don't call it robbery. They call it reparations. They don't call it robbery when they go into the black church. They call it spiritual reparations. The black church been robbing black folks since Dr. King died, ain't been doing nothing for the black community. So these brothers are coming in to get their spiritual reparations from the den of thieves. I don't support it. I don't encourage it. I don't condone it. But what I am saying, it's a new day for the black church. The black church better check itself. The black church had better check itself, had better get some security. And I'm telling all my beautiful African sisters and elders, do not go to church if they do not value your security. Do not go to church if they do not value your life. Do not take your children to church unless you are absolutely certain that you're going to get out of there and your children are going to get out of there safe. I'm not judging nobody. I'm just only telling the truth.